Trigger warnings are unnecessary. No one owes you not to talk about something because you don't want to deal with your own trauma. Censorship is wrong, and demanding people put trigger warnings on things that you have issues with is not their responsibility. Go get therapy and stop expecting the world to revolve around you and your issues. Triggered-ing has been so fucked up as a word because of fucking politics. Trigger warnings are for things that actually cause panic attacks, seizures, flashbacks, etc. It's not just, "Ow, there's some mean words in this, so I gotta tell people to not read if it makes them sad to read the mean words." I think they are overused. But there are situations where trigger warnings are necessary, such as rape scenes in films. Even after therapy, this can cause distress to somebody with PTSD. My friend has a condition, functional neurological disorder, that literally gives her physical, painful seizures when her PTSD is triggered. Trigger warnings have prevented seizures for her. Trigger warning aren't censorship. A trigger warning is exactly that. A warning. It's telling people about what they might see. Like at the beginning of a PG-13 movie when they say sexual themes, violence, etc. That's very similar to what a trigger warning is. How do you feel about flashing light warnings for people with a seizure disorder? Is that too something that someone should go to therapy for? It's not stopping people from talking about certain topics. It's just there for stuff like SAW, abuse, etc. to act as a warning so people who have trauma related to that are aware and can choose to not watch it. It's kind of similar to trigger warnings for flashing lights so people with epilepsy can scroll away. Only difference is that mental instead of physical distress is avoided. All kindness is unnecessary if you are one of the people who needs why you should care about other people explained to you. A trigger warning is not censorship, LMAO. This is a really weirdly aggressive take. A lot of people who have PTSD are already in therapy. Your post seems to make the assumption that these people are taking zero responsibility for their trauma and aren't already doing their best to deal with it. You might be correct that you don't owe someone a forewarning if you are speaking in the legal sense. In the same way that I don't owe you anything and I've done nothing legally wrong if I walk past you and sneer and say you are ugly. But in the moral sense, I think it is very, very odd to feel no sense of responsibility for what your words do to other people. Today on I don't know what censorship means, but I'm going to use the word anyway. Will you show us on a doll where you feel censored by putting 2 words in front of your post? Warning censorship, there is a difference. I get the feeling from the way OP worded because you don't want to deal with your own trauma, that they compare it to like cleaning your room or doing the dishes. As if dealing with trauma is this clear and simple A-B task that people just can't be bothered to do, and that, dear readers, is why we have to suffer through a few extra words. Well, if you would have dealt with your trauma, we wouldn't have to deal with these warnings now, would we? Hands on hips. Momily shaking their head. You understand many people are and remain in therapy for many years due to trauma, right? Like little girls or boys who were molested and raped by family members. They often never recover, despite the fact that they are on medication and in therapy. What you wrote really is more indicative of you being an ignorant, naive sociopath than you holding an unpopular opinion. Nobody is forcing you to do anything, dude. It's something people do out of kindness to help others avoid potentially scary, harmful, or you guessed it, triggering media. It's like saying movie age ratings are stupid and that you should be able to watch R-rated movies at 10 years old. You can, so long as you're not a theater, I suppose. Nobody is going to stop you. They're just giving you a warning it may not be suitable. TW rational response. It's a very simple thing that everyone can do that can make a lot of people's lives better. Takes like 2 seconds to type out a simple line to let people know that what they're about to read may be harmful to them. I don't have to give up my seat for an elderly person on the bus, but it's a simple thing I can do that may make their day better. Warning someone that you're going to be talking about something that might be harmful to them is not censorship. Stopping them from talking about it would be censorship, but allowing them to talk about it as long as they warn people is not censorship. Trigger warnings actually help the issue you claim to be so concerned about. People can hold themselves accountable for their triggers if they're actually given a choice in engaging with the content. I used to think that trigger warnings were unnecessary too. X200B. Until I literally was sent into a massive mental breakdown and had to go to a hospital. It was something related to a severe childhood trauma that I had almost forgotten about. No one owes you not to talk about something. I'm not sure you understand how trigger warnings work. Long story short, just because you don't understand them doesn't mean they are generally unnecessary. That isn't what they're for. It's just a warning for people who may have experienced certain things or may just be uncomfortable, so that they can decide if they want to engage with whatever it is. It has nothing to do with censorship or avoiding topics for the sake of others. Quite the opposite, actually. Triggering intensifies. A trigger warning is a courtesy, not a requirement. Good on content creators if they put one IM because it shows they care, but it isn't something that should be expected. However, viewer discretion warnings should be expected when talking about extreme, disturbing or illegal content, or content that may induce a seizure. How does it hurt you when people put it in as a courtesy to people with serious trauma? As someone with empathy, I'm glad this opinion is unpopular. Okay, but how do trigger warnings, even ones that may not be entirely necessary, affect you in any way? Trigger warnings are for stuff like abuse. I've also seen it used for flashing lights and fast motion. Please check the community for your unpopular opinion before making another unnecessary post about trigger warnings. I think your point only works for strange triggers like, I don't know, pencils, the color blue, horses? But most trigger warnings are used for actual valid things, like Saw, Absi and other horrible stuff. It's totally valid and understandable to not want to hear about traumatic topics. Which trigger warning are useful for? You can see what the post will be about and decide to either stay or scroll. In any case, it should not bother anyone. Lol. TW Saw. As a person who has been raped, I avoid watching films that include a rape scene. Not because rape makes me uncomfy, as it should anyone, but because if I'm in a cinema and watching a movie that includes a rape scene, I will have a full-blown panic attack. Should that mean films should not be allowed to show rape? No. Should that mean I never watch another film? No. Easy solution. Let me know ahead of time so that I will not suffer, as well as not inconvenience or worse traumatize the audience by having a full-blown panic attack and have a fucking ambulance called. Trigger warnings can be helpful for the common triggers, e.g., death, self-harm, suicide, addiction, abuse, because they give people a chance to decide whether or not they want to continue looking at that content. Of course, there can't be trigger warnings for everything, but personally I appreciate when people take the time to give a heads up that their content may be triggering. Everyone should be responsible for their own triggers, but that doesn't mean that nobody should be mindful of others when creating potentially triggering harmful content. Trigger warnings and content warnings are polite in the unfiltered landscape of the internet. Television has always had content advisories for sensitive subjects. It's not a new thing. You just don't like them online because the stigma attached to people who use them primarily. Progressives